Welcome back to my channel and to another YouTube video. We're carrying on with our free session which I started last week as a live stream right here on my channel. If you want to check that out and follow along to see how we drew this eye, this lovely blue eye here, then I'll pop the link in the description below for you, so go and check that out first so you can draw it along. It's roughly 2 hours if you want to follow along with that, and I will continue this one right now by finishing off all of the fur around the outside of the eye. So what we're going to want to do first, we're going to finish off the sort of tear ducty type area around this area here. There's a few kind of light brown burnt sienna type areas that we need to add around here. So we're going to take some of the ivory pencil and we're just going to shade really lightly just in this small triangle here. I'm just making some small circular motions with this. I just want to get rid of some of this graphite here as well. So we're just adding in this tear ducty bit here with the ivory, just coming all the way around this eye with a little bit of this as well. Okay, so straight over that we're going to go in with a little bit of the nougat. So this is a light brown colour. I'm just going to follow the reference photo and fill in this triangle here. Again, using a small circular motion just to try and fill as much of the tooth of paper as possible. And there's a slight little sort of blue reflection right in the corner of this little triangle piece here. So we're just going to leave sort of negative space around that bit so we can fill that in with a little bit of blue and give that kind of really bright highlight. So I'm just using a light pressure, shading back and forth and bringing in that circular motion so we can fill as much of the tooth of the paper as possible with this. I'm also going to overlay some of the Caput Mortuum Violet. And we're also going in there with some walnut brown as well. Darkening up with a few areas of the dark sepia, especially around this highlight is where we've got a majority of the darker colour, so we want to concentrate quite a bit around that bit there. Just going to break it up a little bit and just bring some dark sepia lines into that section there. And I'm also going to lay in some warm tones with some burnt sienna. And I'm just going to use this to kind of bring all of those colours together as well. And just get a little bit darker here and there where we need to. Coming up around the top of the eye as well, I'm just darkening up around here, just hyping up some of those contrasts and everything within the eye as well. I'm going to use a little bit of the ultramarine and just tone that light section with the blue, and then I'm going to use my white pencil, which is a Holbein soft white, and I'm just going to overlay some of that white in there to give it a little bit of a shine. So we do have some little highlight areas just around the tip of this little triangle area here. So again, we're going to take some of the nougat and we're just going to gently start to add this around, and again use a negative space kind of method to go around some of those little highlighted areas. So just using the point of the pencil and just getting a little bit harder with some of the pressure around there where it's a little bit darker. Just using a little bit more of a circular motion to try and blend the edges of this out as well. So just filling in all of the kind of dark spaces and the dark areas on this. I'm going to use some of that Caput Mortuum violet in here as well. Switching to using a little bit of the walnut brown and using it on its side to just blend all of this area in. Getting a bit darker on some of these areas here, and by adding in this colour we're also just helping to blend everything together as well. So in these lighter sections I'm going to take the white pencil and use that to kind of do a little bit of blending, and then we can overlay a little bit of the blue in there. Again, like we did in this bit here, just to give it a little bit more of a sort of white highlight kind of effect. And then directly around that we can use some walnut brown to really darken up those surrounding areas so that white highlighty area really pops out. Using a circular motion to give a little bit more of that kind of smoother texture, and it also helps in areas where it does look a little bit bobbly, a little bit kind of, you've got those skin crease details as well, so using a circular motion is just going to help with all of that. I'm also just using this walnut brown to come off into where the fur is going to meet all of this area. It's going to help to blend it together really nicely. Going to take that Caput Mortuum violet and do the same, so we've got a nice kind of purpley brown overlay there. And I can use the nougat to just bring some fur lines coming off of the edge as we come up the eye as well, following the fur direction. I'm going to use a little bit of the Caput Mortuum violet for that as well. Just so we've got a really nice blend of everything there. coming right into the eye corner and adding in the darkest areas. Using some nougat and coming to the underneath of the eye here as well. And using the walnut brown to darken up some of those lines coming off of the outer eye edge. So really increasing the pressure on the pencil to really get that walnut brown colour down. So I'm just going to continue with the nougat just coming around all of this eye here and just adding in some strokes of nougat to blend into the fur as we come all the way around. So just following the curvature of the eye, coming up and over. Going to increase this little patch back here, so it's a little bit larger, this section just here. So I'm just adding down the ivory base, and then on top of that we're going to go in with some light flash, and we're also going to layer in some of that burnt sienna. Really lightly, so we just get a very faint orange tone coming off of that. Also to the underneath of the eye here as well. I'm going to use some raw umber in there as well. And go back in with the burnt sienna and just darken it up. Going to use some Caput Mortuum Violet to help with the shadow in that area as well, just to help add some fur lines into the surrounding fur from the eyelid here. I'm just going to darken it up a whole bunch as well. So I'm just switching to using some walnut brown to help darken. And using some burnt sienna on the bottom lid here. And then switching back to the nougat and following in with some of those fur lines. Going to use some of the Caput Mortuum Violet to just darken up the edge of the little eyelid here. you go. Okay. So we've got all of the outer eye sections added in. So what we can go ahead and do is start to add in the fur. So we're going to use a mixture of ivory and warm cold grey too. So I'm going to give these both a quick sharpen up. So we're going to start off with using the ivory. We're just going to come into the top section of the eye study here. So we want to shade it in the direction that the fur is going. So we're just going to start at this eye corner down in this smallest section and just work our way round. So just going to get rid of the graphite outline a small bit there. And just fill the whole thing with a layer of the ivory. Going right around the top of the eye there. Okay, so we've got the top of the eye in. Then we're just going to immediately take some of the cold grey too. I'm just going to shade this down using the side of the pencil in some areas where we do have a slightly cooler tone. So it's mainly sort of off towards the right hand side here. So just blending those two colours together. There we go. Okay, so we do have some areas of some darker fur. We also have some areas where we've got a little bit of a yellow toned fur. So we're going to use some raw umber and some nougat to try and define some of those areas first. So just taking some of the nougat, I'm just going to use this to just bring the fur, the defined fur lines from around the sort of tear duct area here. Just try and blend all of this together. Just using the nougat as well, just to do a little bit of shading, add a little bit of a texture to this down here. I'm going to use some raw umber as well, because around the edge of this little tear duct area we've got some yellow and orange toned fur, so using the raw umber is going to give us that really, really lovely yellow tone. And then if we overlay some burnt sienna, it's going to give us a little bit of an orange tone. So when you're building in more of the rich colours like this, we're going to be using a bit more of a fur lining technique. And then we're going to use some dark sepia to help darken up some of the tear duct area now that we've added in some of the fur surrounding. It just needs a little bit of an extra push into a darker side. And then we can use the dark sepia to add in some fur lines to add the shadows between each individual little fur stroke. So just using some more of the raw umber, just using the pencil on its side, getting a really lovely light yellow covering. And there's also a yellow section up here. So up here, just going to lightly layer down some of the raw umber in the direction of the fur. Just in the whole section where we've got that slightly yellowy orange and then slightly darker areas of fur. And then we're just going to use some fur lines to add some more distinguished colour, and this will also really saturate the area with this colour as well, which is perfect. And we're just going to use a fur line technique, so pointing the pencil down and then lifting the pencil towards the edge of the stroke, working backwards from this yellow section into the light section, so in the opposite direction of the fur, so that we can get a nice kind of overlay effect. So it looks like the lighter fur is overlaying the darker fur, and then where you do have on the reference photo the darker fur overlaying the lighter fur, we're going to work in the direction of the fur. I'm just increasing the pressure as well so we can increase the saturation of the yellow area. We're going to take some walnut brown and just go through the middle of that area, adding these real dark fur lines. Again, coming from this section and working into the white fur, so in the opposite direction that the fur is actually travelling in, and that's just going to help to create a little bit of an overlay. So we're going to switch to using a little bit of the nougat again and just adding in some darker areas just at the edge of the piece here. Again, just using some fur lines, just really gently lining those in. And we're just going to start to add in some fur lines into the surrounding areas. So I'm going to go in with some cold grey too, and using firm pressure, this is what we're going to add for the majority of the fur definition for this area, and then mix it with a little bit of the walnut brown. So we're just going to add fur lines pretty much all over. I'm going to use a little bit of the nougat to add in some slightly less dark lines, again just keeping everything really nice and soft. Just working on adding in the sort of shadows in between some of these fur sections. And using the walnut brown to get really dark. Add in the more defining fur sections with the walnut brown. there are some like really dense purple shadows on the eyebrow of this reference here, so I'm just going to use some light flesh. I'm just going to layer that down over the top where we've got those kind of really nice purple vibes. Then we're going to go over and shade in some of the Caput Mortuum Violet. Adding in a few fur lines with this as well, so we can get in some of the sort of shadow areas and still kind of keep this nice purple tone going. Here we go. I'm also just going to use the walnut brown just to bring in a few defining fur lines around the edge of this eye here, like that. Just darkening up some of these areas within the eye as well, now that we've got a nice tone going on the fur. Just going to use some dark sepia to darken this up. Okay, so for the other side of the fur, it's a lot lighter and less of these kind of yellow sections, so just going to continue adding in our fur lines with the cold grey too, just following the direction of the fur. It gets a little bit longer as we come over the eyebrow section, so you can elongate your fur strokes as we come over this bit. As long as you are following that fur direction, like that. Then I'm going to use the nougat to add in a few of those darker fur lines like we did before. So really making sure we kind of overlap some of these as well, just to make the fur look really nice and dense and thick. Just giving all of this fur a little bit more shadow. I'm going to switch to using some walnut brown. Okay, so we can add all of the fur on the underside of this eye study now. So again, we're going to take our ivory pencil, just going to work in the direction that the fur is going. So coming around this little eye section here. And then bringing our pencil round so it kind of flows down to the bottom right hand corner. And continuing to follow the fur around there. And again, we're going to add in a very light layer of the Cold Grey 2 over the top, where we have some slightly more cooler toned areas. So again, that's more off to the right hand section of this. Going into some of the darker areas as well with this Cold Grey 2. Okay, so again we've got some of these yellowy areas, so we're going to take some of the raw umber, using exactly the same technique as what we've just done for the Cold Grey 2. Just going to use the pencil on the side slightly and fill in some of this more yellow toned, just giving it a very nice light yellow base. So a few areas here and there with this. Just coming underneath the eye as well with a little bit of this raw umber. Then we're just going to use the point of the pencil, so just switching up the way that we're holding it and coming in and using it to create some fur lines. And just really kind of saturate a little bit more of that yellow / orange kind of tone going in there. So we're going to come over and use some of the burnt sienna like we did at the top. So bringing in some burnt sienna. And then some walnut brown just to help blend the tear duct area out a little bit more. And then also right down in this corner here, we do have a lot of dark flecked fur. So we're just going to bring in the walnut brown, and we're going to keep the space between our pencil strokes whilst we're creating these fur lines quite far apart. So we're not really grouping them together, so we're creating like a cluster of fur lines. What we're going to do is just keep them quite far apart like this, so that you have some of that underneath tone showing through, and then it gives it like a flecked kind of appearance. I'm also going to take some dark sepia and work some of that in there, doing exactly the same thing. So you're keeping some pockets of that lighter tone fur open. So you've got some little white areas coming through there. Just going to bring the walnut brown up a little bit as well. Like that. It's much better there. Okay, so we're going to use some more cold grey too. I'm just going to come into the lighter bit of fur directly underneath the eye, and we're going to use the cold grey too to just bring in the fur lines like we've done up here. Just give it a little bit of texture. So using a fairly hard pressure with the pencil here just to try and get some sort of tone down on the paper. So just remembering to work in the direction of the fur. Bringing those fur lines through. I'm going to switch to using some nougat. Bringing that through where we've got some darker areas of the fur, and also just blending in some of the fur underneath the eye as well. So we're just using the nougat first, then we can switch to using some slightly darker toned pencils to really exaggerate some of those shadows in between some of the fur lines here. So we've got some more kind of flecked area directly underneath this light toned area underneath the eye. So again, we're going to employ the same kind of technique as what we did underneath here and just leave a few gaps between some of the darker strokes so that you've got some of those lighter areas showing through. There are also some sort of orangey tones coming in here as well, so we're also going to use some raw umber. So I'm just going to add in the raw umber flecks first. So just bringing in some fur lines where I can see a little bit of yellow. And then coming in with the walnut brown, I'm just going to give it a sharpen so we've got a nice sharp point to get some really nice tapered fur lines with. So just starting at the left hand side, it's going to work backwards into the fur and in the direction of the fur so we get a nice overlap, and working that way gives you a really nice natural look as well. So just using the walnut brown to really darken up some of the shadows in between the fur now. Also just going to shade in a few areas that just need to be a little bit darker here. So like we did to the slightly purple area up here, we're just going to give this bit a little bit of a darker tone. So I'm going to take the nougat and I'm just going to use the side of the pencil and shade that down over all of that area. It's just going to help to darken it up. It's immediately going to give it a much darker tone. And we're also going to give the dark sepia pencil a quick sharpen so we can get some really, really dark areas of fur in that section there. So using sharp dark sepia, we're just going to keep the fur lines quite far apart. Don't want to group them close together, otherwise you're going to end up with some really dark areas. And we just want to keep the structure of the fur without darkening the underlayers too much. And we're just going to work in the direction of the fur and ever so slightly in the opposite direction of the fur, just so we get a really nice natural lay of the different fur strokes. Where we do have some slightly darker areas, I am just going in and increasing the pressure on the pencil and also just clustering the fur a little bit closer together. We're also going to use some of the Caput Mortuum Violet through here as well, just so we can tie some of the areas together within the fur and also in the eye itself as well. So I'm just going to go back in with a little bit more raw umber. And also a tiny little bit of the burnt sienna as well in a few places here. So I'm also just going to work on darkening the tear duct area just with the Caput Mortuum Violet a little bit. And into the under eye, I'm actually going to take some dark indigo and work that into the eyelid to create a nice dark colour, and it's also creating like a purple colour which is going to tie into this area of the fur, and the blues are also going to help tie in that area into the actual eye itself as well. So just adding in some darker areas with the dark indigo. Adding in some fur lines as well with the dark indigo through the top, and just a few down the bottom again, just to help tie all of the areas of the cat together. So we've got a really nice cohesive fur colour, and all of the components sit really nicely with each other. And I think we're then about done. So all that would need to happen now is to go through and just assess any of the colours. If anything needs hyped up, maybe leave it a couple days just to let your eyes adjust, since you've been working on it for a little while. Usually when you let things sit for a little bit, you come back to it with fresh eyes and you can see all of the changes that you need to make, or no changes. Yeah, you can see all of the sort of tones and the contrasts a lot easier when you come back to something that you haven't worked on for a couple days. So if you are feeling a little bit bored with it, or a little bit frustrated that it's not quite getting where you want it to be, maybe just leave it alone. Perhaps it is quite getting there but you're not just seeing it. So yeah, have a little break from your piece and then come back to it and see if any adjustments need making, and then you are pretty much ready to call it done. But if you're happy with your eye at the moment and all of the fur is looking good, then absolutely leave it be. You don't have to come back and make any adjustments if you don't want to, but I usually do that with mine after a couple of days, or sometimes a couple of weeks if I come back to a piece and I think, oh, it just needs a little bit hyping up here, then I will do that as well. But thank you so much for watching this. Hopefully you have learnt a little bit about drawing a nice glassy looking eye, and adding all the highlights and everything in there, creating this really lovely eye texture as well. And then also a little bit into the fur surrounding the outside. So hopefully you've learned something, and I will catch you guys in the next YouTube video. Bye!
I've been running down the empty streets, blindfolded by misbeliefs. I've been back to where we met, all the moments and regrets.